Tim's News Explosion. 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 Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Tim's News Explosion. It is Monday, the 4th of October, 2021. We are live, as always, on the Wilmsfront YouTube and DLive channels, as well as on the Entropy Interactive software, where you can ask a direct question, or even better yet, send through a super chat. It is 8:30 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria, where we are officially the most lockdown city in the world on cumulative days, passing Buenos Aires, Argentina's record of 245 days. Don't cry for us, Argentina. But despite this record amount of time in lockdown, there's still at least another 3 weeks to go, including at the moment we still have the city under a 9 p.m. curfew. All of this time under draconian police state lockdown has not been flattening the curve. So with the state having recorded 5 consecutive days of over 1,000 new cases, with the highest peak so far being just this Saturday past with 1,488 cases. That was also the day when another anti-lockdown protest took place in inner Melbourne around the Royal Botanical Gardens. It was organised by a new group calling themselves the VicFreedom Movement. Now, obviously, they're wanting to replace the activities of the Melbourne Freedom Rally, who, as I mentioned last week, their leader, Harrison McLean, was charged with incitement. And so part of his bail conditions is that he has to abide by the Chief Health Officer's directions. And now on Saturday, there was only around 250 people who turned up. Obviously, the last couple of weeks of Victoria police brutality has certainly deterred a lot of people coming out to dare break their health orders. So it was a pretty peaceful event until obviously Victoria Police made their move and started to pick off the protesters one by one, dragging to the ground. I think there was one bleeding as well. Now, this is a common theme of the protests around Melbourne, and of course the mainstream media at the Shrine was already there to catch in their view champion police getting rid of these ratbag far right anti-vax neo-Nazi protesters, and obviously that was the narrative put forward against the construction worker protests, against the industry shutdown and mandatory vaccination. But we have had a high-profile dissenter from that narrative. Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, he on an IPA podcast said this.
You've got people there at the Shrine of Remembrance with flags, with placards. To the best of my observation, they were simply there to make a point. They weren't being violent. They weren't being vandalistic. They weren't being destructive. And then you had the Victorian police lined up like stormtroopers, eventually charging them with rubber bullets and tear gas. Now, I don't think you can say that all the right was on one side there.
And now Tony Abbott, he hasn't backed down on those remarks. And let's also remember that Tony Abbott was he was hit with a $500 mask fine by the New South Wales Police after one of the local Manly residents who doesn't like him snitched on him to the police because he was spotted talking to someone out in the open air near the beach without a mask. Of course, the horror. And you can hear the full context of Tony Abbott's comments, which were featured on a IPA podcast, which is it's done by one of their fellows. It's called the Australian Heartland. That's done by Daniel Wild, who you might see on Sky News from time to time. He's got sort of this longish hair, and he's got the Harry Potter glasses. So if you see him on Sky News, that's what he looks like. Now, because the Dan Andrews government's police force was so successful in brutally suppressing the protests over the past 2 weeks, construction is reopening tomorrow, but only for construction workers who've had 1 dose of the vaccine. On Friday, Daniel Andrews decided to mandate for all authorised workers on the authorised worker list under the current state of emergency that they would all have to get their first jab by the 15th of October and their second jab by the 26th of November. Victoria will officially be a no jab, no job state. Of course, the vaccine is still not mandatory. You will just need it if you leave your home to work for a living. That's pretty much it. And I have heard in the last 24 hours that a couple of teachers are challenging the mandate in the Supreme Court of Victoria starting tomorrow, an expedited hearing. So it'll be interesting to see where that case goes, whether the Supreme Court of Victoria would dare strike down one of Dan's state of emergency directives based on health advice, of course, given that it clearly violates the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and responsibilities. Now, obviously, the reason why, even though there is a lot of lockdown fatigue in Victoria, people frustrated, angry that they haven't seen their loved ones, many prevented from working. The reason why, apart from the Victoria Police brutality, why there aren't many other people revolting is because the peasants still have all their food on the supermarket shelves and at the fast food, but that was under threat under the current isolation policies of the Victorian Health Department. So they've changed the isolation requirements if supermarket workers are exposed or in the vicinity of a positive case, that the whole store is knocked down for 14 days. So this came about on Friday because some supermarkets, they have been only open for 4 hours a day or shut entirely. And this is why this agreement was reached between the Victorian Health Department and the major supermarkets, Coles, Woolworths, and Aldi's. So fully vaccinated workers in essential industries, which, well, it'll be soon be all of them come November 26th, I should say, are generally not required to isolate as a result of casual contact with a positive case, and supermarkets can manage their contact tracing. And the reason why that the Victorian Health Department has agreed to this is because there has not been hardly any transmission of the virus in supermarkets. There's been, for all this talk about fleeting transmission, there's not, you just brush past somebody in the supermarket and you catch it. That really hasn't been the case during this current outbreak. the current story is that, well, it's Victorians' fault that the cases continue to rise for breaking the rules, going to other people's houses for parties to catch up for coffee. It's always our fault that cases are going up, not the Victorian government's or Daniel Andrews's fault. Now, one thing that certainly was the Victorian Health Department, Dan Andrews' government fault was, well, the fact that we were the only state or territory in Australia to have a extended lockdown in that year, and that was due to the Andrews government employing untrained security guards for the first incarnation of hotel quarantine in the state, which is being phased out. So WorkSafe Victoria, finally acting on a complaint by Ken Phillips from Self-Employed Australia. He was on my show late last year. He's going to come back on in the next week. So WorkSafe last week announced that they were charging Victoria Police with 58 breaches of OHS laws. Victoria Health could face fines of 1.64 million per charge, but no individual is going to be charged with these quarantine failures. Not Daniel Andrews, not the then Health Minister Jenny Mikakos. It's going to be the corporate entity of the Department of Health, which means, well, basically, if the fines are handed down by the courts, it'll be the transfer of taxpayers' money from one entity to another minus the lawyers' fees there. So we still lose there, even though there's been some sort of illusion of accountability. And now we keep getting told by Dan Andrews and his various health officials that we just need to get to those 70-80% double-dosed vaccination targets to reopen. At 70%, which we're projected to reach at late October. That'll only get us to lockdown light with a 25-kilometre radius, still outdoor mask and no home visitors. The only really reopening will be 80% double dose, which is early to mid November. And on Sunday at his last press conference, Dan Andrews brought out a teary nurse. Obviously, there's a lot of nurses who are complaining that they're overworked at the moment. And we had this nurse here at Dan's press conference on Sunday claiming that COVID-19 patients are begging for vaccines before being put on life support. This was by, can't remember the nurse's name. This was done by David Hiscock on the XYZ. And even before David had published this, I knew that I'd heard this news that COVID-19 patients were begging for the jab movements to be more put on life support, because this was a story from Alabama back in August. It's too late. Doctor says people begging for COVID vaccine before being intubated. So yes, it's the exact same story nearly exact same story word for word from a US doctor in Alabama from a Melbourne nurse. And the reason why she and other nurses are overworked at the moment and why there's so much ambulance ramping at our hospitals is not because of COVID patients, it's because of all the deferred care for the last 18 months, because people have been too scared to go to hospital or seek treatment during lockdowns because they're scared they might get COVID, so they just delay it, but they can't put it off any longer after 18 months of deferred care. Remember, the hospitals were empty at the beginning of the pandemic here in Australia, and now we have this perfect storm of deferred care, and so that's why there's lots of ambulance ramping. Martin Foley, the health minister, admitted this, that it's not because of COVID cases, but because of people not deferring seeking treatment for so long. But speaking of Martin Foley, this misspoke or misspeak that he made last Tuesday at a press conference has gone viral around the world. I'll just play it and then explain it.
Of the people who were in hospital yesterday, 78% were vaccinated and 17 were partially vaccinated.
Now, he did misspeak there. He meant to say 78% of the people in hospital with COVID are unvaccinated. So that was a gaffe, and it was obviously shared around the world and passed off as a true statistic, which it was not. And there was I know that some people are not going to be pleased in my audience that I'm doing RMIT ABC fact check, but it's correct that his vaccination gaffe fuels misinformation around the globe. So it says here, slip of the tongue by Martin Foley, suggesting that 95% of hospitalised people were partially or fully vaccinated. Goes down here. A spokeswoman for Mr. Foley confirmed a fact check, however, that 78% of those in hospitals were unvaccinated, while 70% had received one dose. That means a mere 5% of hospitalised COVID-19 patients in Victoria were double jabbed. And a lot of the double jabbed patients in hospital due to COVID are aged care residents who are put there for observational reasons to see how they fare. But up in New South Wales, it is true that there is a lot of elderly people double jabbed dying with COVID, I should emphasise.
As the Minister said, tragically today we announced the deaths of 7 people who have lost their lives to COVID-19, 4 women and 3 men. 1 person was in their 40s, 1 person in their 50s, 2 people in their 70s, 2 people in their 80s, and 1 person who was in their 90s. All of those individuals had underlying health conditions. 1 person was not vaccinated, 3 people had received 1 dose of a COVID vaccine, and 3 people had received 2 doses of a COVID vaccine.
Now, obviously, if you have underlying health conditions and are really, really old, double, triple jabbed is not going to keep you alive forever. So there is still a high possibility that you can die with COVID. But now there's obviously all this talk about the vaccines in preventing serious illness from COVID, but there's also a lot of new drugs being developed to treat COVID. And one of the big pharma firms over in the United States, Merck, has said that their experimental COVID treatment pill cuts the worst effects of COVID by 50%. So this was through their clinical trials. And now there's something interesting to note about Merck. The US government has already committed to purchase 1.7 million doses of the drug if it is authorized by the FDA. Merck has said it can produce 10 million doses by the end of the year and has contracts with government worldwide. Do you know what other drug that Merck developed many years ago? Does anyone in the chat know? They created ivermectin. Merck 25 years ago. It was in the Merck pharmaceutical labs where ivermectin was created. So a lot of people have been saying, is this just a sort of rebranded ivermectin? And Merck, they also developed vaccines as well. Their most famous one is the HPV vaccine, which is given to young girls to prevent cervical cancer. It's also called Gardasil. So that is a bit of the background on Merck there. Now, obviously, it was another huge week in Victoria, but up in New South Wales on the same day that Dan went all out with the vaccine mandate. He also said at that press conference that there's no such thing as a private business. That was a direct quote from him as well. 2 hours later, New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian announced that she was resigning after ICAC announced that they were going to be investigating her directly over 10 days of public hearings about whether she improperly helped her ex-boyfriend, Daryl Maguire, secret ex-boyfriend, secure a grant for his electorate of Wagga Wagga for a clay shooting range, which failed a cost-benefit analysis. Yes, Dawn, I've seen that hashtag trending on Twitter for the past few days. It's amazing that it's been able to last in the Twitter sphere for that long. Now, I remember Dawn, speaking of you on Friday, you were in the comments of Trad Tasman Talk, saying "Ding dong, the witch is dead." There were certainly some people on the hard right and the hard left saying that and celebrating, but there was a outpouring of grief, and there's now been several days of mourning from Gladys's admirers, supporters. So this is from NCA Newswire. Cards, flowers left at home of outgoing Premier after bombshell resignation. So this was on her office in her electorate of Willoughby. Save Gladys, keep Gladys. New South Wales swindled. In a world of grey sludge, you are a diamond. There's all the this is not just a Twitter hashtag. People physically went out, and Sydney's still under lockdown, mind you. You're only allowed to leave for essential reasons. Went out to buy flowers and handwrite cards and present them to the Premier's electorate office there. And somebody also put out a balloon outside of her private residence as well. It's I compared it to the outpouring of grief that happened when Princess Diana died, except Gladys, she hasn't died. She's simply resigned. And obviously a lot of people overseas are perplexed at how come all the Australian people are just tolerating all these police state lockdowns. Well, look at how people have reacted to Gladys resigning, crying in the streets and presenting flowers, even though she's put them into a lockdown for over 100 days. That's your answer. I mean, we have the Dan stands in Victoria. They're pretty committed, but so are the Gladys stands up there as well. And now we also had today the Deputy Premier of New South Wales, the State Nationals leader, John Barilaro, announced that he will also quit politics. Gladys is also quitting.
Every time you log in, I'll be
stupidnews.com.au autoplay. And he said that part of the reason for his resignation is so he can spend more time on legal action against what he calls violent, racist social media attacks, which he said played a role in his decision to resign. and leave Parliament. He said, "A young boy of migrant parents, I grew up and understood what racism was. I was called many of those names. I didn't think in 2021 that would continue." Now, he's obviously referring to Jordan Shanks, also, well, known on YouTube as Friendly Geordies, suing him in the federal court over 2 videos which defamed him, which he claims defamed him in a vile and racist attacks, which portrayed him as a corrupt con man. Barilaro said, "I don't know how many of you endure what I've endured online. I feel for young men and women, young boys and girls that get bullied on social media. And as someone who's been around the traps, it's rough and tough. I've got to tell you that it's made it very difficult for me, very, very difficult when you get online and the abuse cop started by disgusting, vile, racist commentary." He denied that his resignation was triggered by Gladys Berejiklian's decision to resign as well. So there's going to be an election for the new New South Wales Liberal leader and the new New South Wales National Party leader. But as is usually the case in the New South Wales Liberal Party, the factions do a stitched up deal before there is a party room ballot, so it is not competitive. So the New South Wales Treasurer and Deputy Liberal leader Dominic Perrottet is the Premier-elect, with Stuart Ayres, the MP for Penrith, running as his deputy on a joint ticket. Now, Stuart Ayres, interesting fact, he's 41 years old. He's the domestic partner of the Foreign Minister, Maurice Payne, who's 57. There's a 16-year age gap there. So they're a pretty powerful couple in the New South Wales dominant moderate faction. Now, as I mentioned, the hard left were cheering when Gladys resigned, though they're quite in a panicked frenzy that Dominic Perrottet is now the New South Wales Premier-elect because he is a conservative Catholic and father of 6. And it goes down here: a man with a big family and strong ideals around freedom. The horror. The man who is set to take the New South Wales job at a critical time. So if we go down here, he grew up in West Pennant Hills in the Hills District, as sort of the Bible Belt of Sydney. His family ideals are fierce, and he went on to have 6 of his own children. He was one of 13 children there. He voted against decriminalising abortion in 2019. Amen to him. As a child, he attended the Roman Catholic school Redford College in Durrell. The school chaplain is an Opus Dei priest, and there's all this scuttlebutt about, as it's referred to, the Opus Dei sect. It's a recognised part of the Catholic Church and has historically been accused of secrecy, elitism, and misogyny. Note, accused by people who hate the Catholic Church. Mr. Perrottet has never shied away from making his faith public. I think having a Christian faith is part of who I am and inspires me to make a difference wherever I go. I'll know the horror. And it says here, his inaugural speech to Parliament in 2011, he said he would lead based on the 4 ideals of sacrifice, generosity, freedom, and opportunity. I believe in freedom because it is only by exercising freedom that individuals can develop the habits of generosity, hard work, fairness, and concerns for others. Wow, that is such a awesome message to hear from the Premier-elect of New South Wales. Let's hope that he does, as the blue drops on Twitter fear, and quickens New South Wales to full reopening, including no masks, no QR codes anywhere. Now, I know that there are some on the anti-establishment right who have reservations about Dominic Perrottet because his father works at the World Bank, developing tourism projects, and has been associated with the World Economic Forum. But we will judge him by what he does as Premier. Now, obviously, as I've been reporting and reminding you on this show that what's happening in Australia is being viewed around the world as a horror show, and we're also an international laughing stock. And there have been protests outside Australian embassies against the Australian government's, the New South Wales, Victoria and ACT extended lockdowns and the police state response. So there were protests on the weekend in London, England, and also in Dublin, Ireland, and also in Warsaw in Poland. These four MPs from I'm not sure if it says in this Cauldron Pool article which coalition that they're from. But yeah, they stood outside the Australian embassy in Warsaw. All of their speeches were in Polish, so it's not worth me playing you any of it. But some quotes there. Australia has unsubscribed herself from the international community, the community of civilized nations. We therefore demand that the Warsaw government condemn what is happening in Australia. We're also ready to rush in help, legal aid to organize the evacuation of Polish dual citizens as refugees from the People's Republic of Melbourne. So it's being watched by the rest of the world. Other foreign media who has focused in what is happening in Australia is Alex Jones Infowars, Paul Joseph Watson Summit News, Fox News. Laura Ingram has had George Christensen on. Tucker Carlson recently had Gideon Rosner from the IPA on. Luke Radowski from We Are Change has also done several videos on Australia. Stu Peters on Telegram as well, and also Katie Hopkins as well is continuing to cover what she'd call Corona bollocks, the batshit crazy bonkers world that we live in now. Remember, she got deported from Australia for joking that she was going to open up a hotel door nude to in front of the ADF who were guarding it. And we also had the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who has kept Florida completely open for the past year. Banned mask mandates, banned vaccine passports, and medical discrimination. This is what he said about Australia last week.
What's going on in Australia right now, they're enforcing, after a year and a half, they're still enforcing lockdowns by the military, and that's not a free country. It's not a free country at all. In fact, I mean, I wonder why we would still have the same diplomatic relations when they're doing that. I mean, is Australia freer than China, communist China right now? I don't know. The fact that that's even a question tells you something has gone dramatically off the rails.
Yes, a lot of the footage that you see of police brutality, a lot of people make the point, no, this is not communist China. This is the streets of Melbourne or Sydney, Australia. And those Polish MPs, they compared us to North Korea. Well, you've seen in New South Wales, the grieving for just the resignation of the dear leader up there, the way they were crying and mourning. It was like the North Korean mourners when Kim Jong-il died, and they were all crying on the street. But we all know that Florida, how awesome Governor DeSantis has been in sticking it to the lockdown crowd. But it's for some people, the idea of individual liberty and personal responsibility and freedom is more like a horror movie. And one of the leaders of the Remove Ron movement has released this chilling film trailer.
Look what's going on in Australia.
Oh.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of your cabin crew, we'd like to inform you that we have officially entered Florida airspace. Now that we're making our final descent, please watch this short message from Governor Ron DeSantis on COVID-19. Thereafter, everyone on board will be required to comply with the state's Forever Purge.
We are not doing any vaccine passports in the state of Florida. We trust people to make their own decisions in this state. We are not going to be bludgeoning people with restrictions and mandates and lockdowns or any of that stuff.
As Governor DeSantis stated, while you're within state lines, you do not have to wear a mask. You do not have to get a vaccine. It is against the law for private businesses or schools to mandate masks or vaccines. And you have the absolute right to infect whoever you want, whenever, and wherever with COVID-19. Thank you for traveling with us, and please, enjoy your Forever Purge.
COVID-19 is surging again.
This is the time to double down.
The governor is doubling down. He says students shouldn't be forced to wear masks.
If you are trying to lock people down, I'm going to stand in your way.
Florida just requested 300 new ventilators.
Hospitals are filling up here.
There is evidence that children are making up much higher cases that are emerging.
The numbers continue to rise across Florida.
This fall, don't breathe in.
This is insane.
The Forever Purge. Coming to a theater and live streaming networks near you.
Now, just to reiterate, this is not satire. This was a serious, this film is a serious liberal leftist attack on Ron DeSantis. And you can see just how they have the spooky music over that we trust individuals to make their own decisions. We're not going to have lockdowns. We're not going to force children to wear masks. This is apparently a horror state. But the thing is that I assume the person that made that ad is still a Florida resident, even though there's all this online rage against the free state of Florida. People aren't fleeing Florida to go to safe lockdown states like California. No, people are going from places like California to Florida. They're fleeing lockdown and restricted California to go to Florida. And obviously when New South Wales begins to reopen starting next Monday under new Premier Dom, I hope that Dom becomes like Ron in Florida. I doubt that despite all the blue drips being horrified that, he's going to open up completely and let it rip, I doubt that many of those people in New South Wales are going to flee to continued lockdown Melbourne. In fact, it's going to be the opposite. A lot of people in still lockdown Melbourne are going to try and make their way to the free state of New South Wales, because there is no guarantee that Dan is going to significantly ease restrictions later in the month and early this month. Don't take any of it to the bank. And of course, well, who knows where the cases are going to be tomorrow and what Dan's going to say tomorrow, what next mandate he's going to have next. It's always one day at a time here in Melbourne, Victoria. That's it for Tim's News Explosion tonight. Thank you for everyone for watching again. I've got a super chat here from Senator Slayer for $3 It says here, please chat, stop attacking Marg for getting double vaxxed. Her body, her choice. Yes, I know that there's this constant allegation in the chat that Margot Huss is double vaccinated. She obviously have to prove through a medical document to everyone in the chat that she's not vaccinated. So she'll have to provide that proof that she is not vaccinated, and so I'm not. I guess she'll have to film herself being refused access to a venue later in the year because she's not vaccinated. So I guess we'll just have to await that proof there. I'll see you all next for Wilms Front, 8:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time now. We've switched to Daylight Savings here. My guest will be Nick Holt, who's a new and upcoming independent alt media journalist. He's got he's already had a massive following on Twitter with his bold and brash commentary on his podcast. He's had really high profile guests such as Miranda Devine, Andrew Bogut, and also recently George Papadopoulos. So I'm very much looking forward to chatting with him. And of course, Trad Tasman Talk, 6 p.m. Friday, Eastern Daylight Time, back with Dewey DeBoer, who was in the seventh week of the Auckland snap lockdown. Jacinta Ardern today, she was the latest to abandon COVID zero and release her own roadmap to reopening. So I'll be discussing that with Dewey, amongst other things as well. So thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you Thursday. Good night, everyone. Tim's News Explosion. 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 Tim's News Explosion.